Hi, everyone. Welcome to the mandated reporting overview. My name is Kim Summers. I am a forensic interviewer with the Adams County Children's Advocacy Center, and I will be presenting today's training. We created this training based off of the National Children's Alliance Standard number 10, which will be in effect in 2023 for child safety and protection. Under this standard, all staff at the Children's Advocacy Center are considered to be mandated reporters, and we are required then to ensure that mandated reporter training is provided to all staff and volunteers, including any updates on an annual basis. So we created this presentation in order to provide those updates. This training is approved as 1 hour of training credit. It is only a refresher, and it is not meant to meet the full training requirement for mandated reporter training. The full 3-hour course can be found at reportabusepA.pitt.edu if you are in need of that training, and that training is required to be updated every 5 years. So today's learning objectives are to be able to define components and categories of child abuse, differentiate between mandated and permissive reporters, determine if you are a mandated or permissive reporter, identify when you should be reporting, and identify the penalties for not reporting. We do have a quick video to show just that really emphasizes the reasons behind reporting any type of child abuse.
He wouldn't stop hitting us.
Help me.
I'm scared.
It hurts. He told me not to tell.
Make the call.
Make the call.
Before it's too late.
Suspected? Report it. Make the call. 1-800-932-0313.
Paid for by Pennsylvania taxpayer dollars.
Okay. So that was a quick commercial that Pennsylvania actually put out among public television, emphasizing reporting child abuse and the reasons behind why we report. So there are different components of child abuse. The 3 main components are the child, which is considered to be anyone under 18 years old. There's the act or failure to act, so something that is done to a child to cause harm or potential harm, or something that is not done that would prevent them from being harmed. And then there is the perpetrator, which is the person committing the abuse. There are different people who are considered to be perpetrators under the Protective Services Law. So those include a parent spouse or paramour, whether current or former, a person 14 years or older responsible for the child's welfare, a person 14 years or older who is residing in the same home as the child, a person 18 years or older not residing in the same home but is related within the 3rd degree, or a person 18 years or older engaging in severe forms of trafficking. Within abuse reports, there are 2 types of categories. Child line professionals categorize the reports as either Child Protective Services or General Protective Services. This is not something that you as the reporter need to know. The Child Protective Services requires an investigation and includes one of the 10 categories of abuse per the Child Protective Services Law, and we'll get to those categories in just a moment. The General Protective Services require an assessment for services or supports to prevent potential harm to the child. Those types of things would include things like the child being without proper care or supervision, education, if they've been abandoned by guardians, if they are habitually truant or disobedient of guardians, if they are under 10 years old and have committed a delinquent act, if they have been formally educated dependent, and or commit an act that is defined as ungovernable. So let's talk a little bit about how we define abuse per the Child Protective Services law. This includes intentionally knowing or recklessly doing one of the following things: causing bodily injury through act or failure to act, fabricating, feigning, exaggerating, or inducing medical symptoms that result in harmful medical evaluation or treatment of the child, causing or substantially contributing to serious mental injury of the child, causing sexual abuse or exploitation, causing serious physical neglect, causing the death of a child through an act or failure to act, and engaging in severe forms of trafficking, whether persons or sexual. In terms of types of abuse, there are generally four main types that we think of. Bodily injury is impairment of physical conditions or causing substantial pain. There's mental injury, which is causing a psychological condition as diagnosed by a doctor that renders a child chronically, severely anxious, withdrawn, agitated, depressed, psychotic, or fearing for their life or safety, or it seriously interferes with their ability to accomplish age and developmentally appropriate tasks. And then there's physical neglect, which includes repeated, prolonged, or egregious failure to supervise the child, or failure to provide adequate essentials for life, which would include things like food, shelter, or medical care. Abuse is also defined per the CPSL as engaging in any of the following recent acts, with recent being within the past 2 years: kicking, biting, throwing, burning, stabbing, or cutting a child that endangers the child, unreasonably straining or confining a child based on consideration of the method, location, or duration of the restraint or confinement, forcefully shaking a child under 1 year of age, forcefully slapping or otherwise striking a child under 1 year of age, interfering with the breathing of a child, causing a child to be present in a location while a violation of PA Code 18, subsection 7508.2 is occurring, providing that the violation is being investigated by law enforcement. And that code really refers to the operation of a methamphetamine laboratory. And leaving a child unsupervised by an individual other than a parent, while knowing that that individual meets one of the criteria: that they are required to register as a tier 2 or tier 3 sexual offender, where the victim was under 18 years of age when the crime was committed, that they have been determined to be a sexually violent predator, or have been determined to be a sexually violent delinquent child. In terms of human trafficking, that is considered a child abuse offense. The federal government has legislation against human trafficking. The three main legislations are the Trafficking and Victims Protection Act of 2000, Preventing Sex Trafficking and Strengthening Families Act of 2014, and Justice for Victims of Trafficking Act of 2015. Pennsylvania enacted legislations in 2015 and 2016, amending titles 23, 42, and 18 in relation to trafficking. Under these legislations, severe forms of trafficking include sex trafficking, which is the commercial sex act induced by fraud, force, or coercion, or person performing the acts is under 18. Persons trafficking is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, provision, or obtaining a person for labored services through fraud, force, or coercion for the purpose of indentured servitude, peonage, debt bondage, or slavery. And then there's also labor trafficking, which is trafficking obtained by the use of threat, serious harm, or abuse of legal processes, where people are working for little to no pay, frequently in factories or on farms, or are forced into domestic servitude by providing services within a household 10 to 16 hours per day. There are certain groups of children who are more at risk for being trafficked, and those include youth in foster care, youth with a history of disabilities, mental health issues, or substance use disorders, sexual abuse, being involved with the child welfare system in any way, family dysfunction, and a history of running away or homelessness. It also includes youth who identify as being within the LGBTQIA+ community or identify as Native or Aboriginal. So let's talk a little bit about indicators of abuse so we know how to recognize different types of abuse in children. The first that we're going to talk about today is bodily injury. So some physical indicators of bodily injury abuse includes unexplained injuries, bruises in various stages of healing, bruises resembling objects, bruises located on the face, ears, neck, buttocks, back, chest, thighs, the back of the legs, or genitalia. And the injuries are inconsistent with the age or developmental level of the child. Some behavioral indicators of bodily injury abuse include a fear of going home, extreme apprehension and vigilance, pronounced aggression or passivity, if they flinch easily or avoid physical contact with others. Their play includes abusive talk or actions. They are unable to recall how injuries occurred, or their explanations are inconsistent with the nature of injuries or are unbelievable, and they show fear of a parent or caregiver. Some indicators of sexual exploitation. The physical indicators of this include sleep disturbances, bedwetting, pain, irritation, or injuries in the genital or anal areas, difficulties walking or sitting, difficulty urinating, being positive for STIs or pregnancy. Behavioral indicators of sexual exploitation include sexually acting out, sexual play or drawings that are inappropriate for their age or developmental level, showing a cruelty to others or animals, fire setting behaviors, heightened anxiety, withdrawing from peers, family, and preferred activities, or excessive and injurious masturbation. Indicators of mental injury include frequent psychosomatic complaints such as nausea, stomach ache, headaches, bedwetting, self-harm, and speech disorders. Some behavioral indicators of mental injury include expressing feelings of inadequacy, being fearful of trying new things, being overly compliant, having poor peer relationships, having an excessive dependence on the adults in their lives, any type of habit disorder, so sucking or rocking, showing eating disorder behavior, and also showing symptoms of anxiety and or depression. And indicators of physical neglect include a lack of adequate medical or dental care, especially when families are able to provide those things, showing frequent hunger. I apologize for my cat. He likes to join my Zoom calls. Having a lack of shelter, significantly low weight for their age, showing developmental delays, having persistent and untreated medical conditions, having exposure to different types of hazards, and dirty, whether inappropriate clothing or clothing that's of the incorrect sizing. Some behavioral indicators of physical neglect may include not being registered in school or being very truant from school, having inadequate or inappropriate supervision, poor impulse control, being frequently fatigued, or having parentified behaviors towards other children, especially younger siblings. And finally, we have some indicators of trafficking. So those could include frequent or multiple STIs or pregnancies, having unexplained injuries, bruising and cuts in various stages of healing, having dirty, weather inappropriate clothing or incorrect sized clothing, especially very stereotypical provocative dresses and skirts in females, and having no identification on them. Behavioral indicators would include being involved in commercial sex act industry or having a prior prostitution record, having explicitly sexual online profiles and extensive internet chats on classified sites, lying about or being unaware of their true age, having no insurance, or having no control over their money, especially when it comes to receiving medical services, showing hypervigilance or paranoid type behaviors, or explanations of their injuries that are inconsistent or unbelievable. While all of those things may show indication that a child is being abused, there are exclusions for what is not considered abuse. So here are some situations that are excluded from being founded as abuse during an investigation, but not being excluded from being reported as being suspicious. So if you see any of these things and you feel that they are abusive towards a child, you should still be reporting that as suspected abuse, but they may not be founded as abuse during an investigation, depending on the severity. So this includes things like environmental factors. If the injuries are based on environmental factors, such as inadequate housing, furnishing, income, or medical services that are beyond the control of the caregiver. In terms of religion, the caregiver is allowed an exception if they're in with third-degree blood relations of the child, and the religion is a formal recognized religion. Children and youth will generally consider monitoring and may seek court intervention in this situation if a child's life is threatened, and the family could be referred for general services if needed. However, this does not apply if a child death occurs. There is no exception for religion if a child death occurs. The next exception is the use of force for supervision, control, or safety. And this includes the use of reasonable force, which constitutes incidental or minor contact designed to maintain order and control of a child. These situations could be where it's necessary to remove a child from a disturbance that would be threatening their well-being, if it prevents self-harm, or is done in self-defense or defense of another person, or to obtain dangerous objects or substances or paraphernalia that the child has. The next exclusion for abuse includes the rights of parents. So nothing shall be construed as child abuse, as it is the rights of the parents to use reasonable force for supervision, control, and discipline of their own child. The next exclusion includes participation in events that include physical contact. So contact included for practice or competition related to interscholastic sports, physical education, recreational activities, or extracurricular activities does not automatically constitute abuse. It could if it is inappropriate and unreasonable, but it does not automatically constitute abuse. The next exclusion is child-on-child contact, and this is harm caused by another child is generally not considered to be abuse unless the child causing the harm falls into those perpetrator categories that we talked about in the beginning, or includes rape, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, sexual assault, aggravated indecent assault, or indecent exposure. It is also not abuse if the injury occurs during a fight, dispute, or scuffle entered by mutual consent of both children. And law enforcement are not required to make a child line report if the person responsible for injury is a non-perpetrator child. That is only applicable to law enforcement. If you see a child harming another child and you believe it to fall into one of those categories of abuse and you are not part of law enforcement, you should still be reporting it to Childline. And finally, the last exclusion for abuse is defensive force. So under PA Crime Code 18, subsection 505 and 506, people can use force in self-protection or the protection of others and have it not be considered child abuse. So let's talk about mandated versus permissive reporting. Permissive reporters are encouraged to immediately report suspected abuse or known child abuse, but are not required to do so by law. Mandated reporters, however, are required by law to immediately report suspected or known child abuse within 24 hours of learning about that abuse. The reporting status, if you are mandated or permissive, depends on a person's occupation and contact with children. So who are mandated reporters? Mandated reporters include anyone on the following list of 16 categories, including a licensed or certified health practitioner, a medical examiner, coroner, or funeral director, a healthcare facility employee or provider licensed by the Department of Health, engaged in admission, examination, or treatment of individuals, a school employee, an employee of a child care service with direct contact with children for their job, clergymen, priests, rabbis, spiritual leaders of any regularly established church or religious organization, an individual whose role as part of a regularly scheduled program is responsible for the welfare of children or has direct contact with children, an employee of a social service agency with direct contact with children, a peace officer or a law enforcement official, an emergency medical provider certified by the Department of Health, a public library employee who has direct contact with children, an independent contractor, or someone supervised by an individual who falls into the categories numbers 1 through 12, an attorney affiliated with an agency responsible for care, supervision, or guidance of children, a foster parent, and also an adult family member who is responsible for the child's welfare or provides services to a child in a family living home that is subject to the license of DHS. There are times when an employee may have privileged communication with a child. Privileged communication between a mandated reporter and a client or patient does not apply to the situation involving child abuse, and it does not relieve a mandated reporter of their duty to report suspected or known child abuse. There are 2 exceptions to that. The clergy members, with them, any confidential communications made to a member of clergy are protected following that the communication between the person and a clergy member are protected only if the clergy member is acting as a role of a confessor or spiritual counselor. If the communicant is seeking absolution, then that communication is considered to be privileged. In terms of attorneys, confidential communication made to an attorney is privileged only when the communication is related to civil or criminal proceedings, where the attorney and client are not required or permitted to disclose confidential discussions. Right now, we have another little video in regards to handling disclosures when a child discloses directly to you as a mandated reporter.
Talk to me so I can understand you. Remember, I am a kid, and I don't always understand grown-up words. Never promise me you will keep what I tell you a secret. Don't tell people who don't need to know. I need to trust you. You need to understand that it might be hard for me to talk about the abuse. Someone might have told me not to tell, or threatened to hurt me or my family if I do tell. I might feel embarrassed or think what happened was my fault. Make sure to tell me that you still care about me. Reassure me that what I tell you doesn't change how you feel about me. I might be testing you to see if I can trust you. I may have tried to tell others but changed my mind. Don't act shocked about what I say. It could make me feel bad. Tell me that it took a lot of courage to tell what happened, and it was the right thing to do. If you are sad, tell me that it is because you care about me and don't want to see me hurt. Tell me you will be okay. I worry about you too. Tell me what is going to happen next. Don't ignore me just because I'm a kid. If I have questions, don't make up answers. Tell me that you don't know, but you will try to find out. It's okay not to always know the answer. I chose to tell you my biggest secret. I am trusting you to help me.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about once you receive a disclosure or you have a suspicion that child abuse is going on, what the basis to report that information is. Mandated reporters are required to report suspected or known child abuse if the reporter comes into contact with a child through employment or occupation. The reporter is directly responsible for the care, supervision, guidance of the child, or is directly affiliated with an organization that is. A reporter receives a specific disclosure about an identifiable child. A reporter receives a disclosure from a child 14 years or older that they have committed child abuse. The child does not have to be present for the reporter to report. A reporter does not have to be able to identify the alleged perpetrator for the report to be made. The reporter does not need to know the relationship between the perpetrator and the child. And it is not the perpetrator's responsibility to determine whether or not the person who allegedly committed the abuse falls into one of those categories of a perpetrator. In order to submit a report to Childline, mandated and permissive reporters can report via phone at 1-800-932-0313. If you do it this way and you are a mandated reporter, you must also make a written report, which is the CY-47, and submit to the county CYS agency assigned within 48 hours of reporting. The CY-47 can be found at keepkidssafe.pa.gov. Mandated reporters can also report electronically at compass.state.pa.us/CWIS. And on this website, referrals can be made online and are archived and can be reviewed at any time by the person who has made the report. You will have to create an individual login in order to report electronically and archive your reports. Reports are always to be made by the person who suspects the abuse or directly receives the disclosure. After you submit a report, mandated reporters are required to notify the person in charge of their institution, school, facility, or agency or the designated agent of the person in charge of that information. So what information goes into a report of child abuse? When reporting known or suspected child abuse, you may be asked for any of the following information: the name and physical description of a child, their age or approximate age range of the child, the names and contact information on the child's household members, including their legal guardians, name, contact information, or physical description of the suspected perpetrator, the suspected perpetrator's relationship to the child, if it is known, description of the suspected injury to the child. If you are making electronic reports, there are body diagrams available where you can specifically state what part of the child's body was injured. You'll also be asked where the incident took place, if there are any concerns for the child's immediate safety. It is required for mandated reporters to report the reporter's name, contact information, and your relationship to the child. However, that is kept anonymous and confidential from the family involved. It will be provided to law enforcement or the district attorney's office as needed. You'll also be asked if any actions were taken to assure the immediate safety of the child, and if so, what actions were taken. After a report is made, Childline determines which county children and youth agency the report goes to within Pennsylvania. They also determine the type of report and what category it falls into. So if it is a general protective services case, then it will go to only children and youth. And this report indicates that a child may need other services, and the children and youth agency can assess the family's needs for those services. Childline may make a referral to children and youth and have it be considered a child protective services case. And that is when the alleged abuser falls within the CPSL definition of a perpetrator. The Childline worker may decide that this referral should only go to law enforcement. And in that case, it means that the alleged abuser does not fall within the perpetrator definition, but it does include a violation of the law. And the fourth option is that it is referred to both children, youth, and law enforcement, which is when the abuser falls under the CPSL definition of a perpetrator and the report includes a violation of law. There are protections for reporters. So one protection is that you will be considered immune from liability for any reports made in good faith from any charges that would result from making a report of suspected abuse, whether or not it is required, cooperating or consulting with an investigation, including information about a child fatality or near fatality, testifying in proceedings related to the report, engaging in actions related to photographs, medical testing, and x-rays subject to the report, taking a child into protective custody, admitting them to the hospital, or relating to mandated reporting and death investigations. This includes DHS and children and youth employees and officials. Good faith is assumed for the purpose of any civil or criminal proceedings for any person required to make reports. And any person known to make a false report of child abuse against a school, private residential institution, detention facility, or their employees commits a misdemeanor of the second degree. So what happens if you suspect or know child abuse is happening, but you fail to report? You can be charged with a felony of the third degree if a mandated reporter willingly fails to report child abuse, the abuse constitutes a felony of the first degree or higher, and the reporter had direct knowledge of the nature of abuse. Other offenses related to failure to reporting abuse are considered to be misdemeanors of the second degree. In 2019, Pennsylvania added additional penalties through Act 88 of 2019, which includes that if a person fails to report and a child is continually subjected to suspected abuse by the same individual, or the same individual has contact with the child, the should-be reporter has committed a felony of the third degree. This act also added that if a person at the time of sentencing for aforementioned offenses has a prior conviction of related offenses, they automatically commit a felony of the third degree. And in both scenarios, if the abuse constitutes a felony of the first degree or higher, the should-be reporter commits a felony of a second degree. The statute of limitations for any failure to report is equal to the statute of limitations for the crime against the child, or 5 years, whichever is greater. As a mandated reporter, you do have the right to know the outcome of your report. DHS notifies mandated reporters via mail within 3 business days of receiving the results of an investigation, and those include whether the abuse was founded, indicated, or unfounded, any services provided, arranged for, or to be provided by the county agency to the child or family. As of 2017, there have been several new child protective services laws enacted within Pennsylvania. So we're going to go through some of them now. Act 68 of 2017 allows emergency service providers on the grounds of an entity employing the provider to take a child into protective custody. Act 10 of 2018 provides a mandatory reporting period of probation for certain sexual offenders and establishing a 10-year or lifetime registration requirement for individuals who have committed sexually violent offenses before December 20th, 2012. Act 29 of 2018 further expands the definition of child abuse to include when a person leaves a child alone with an individual known to be a sexually violent predator or subject to lifetime registration. It also provides grounds for involuntary termination of parental rights for parents required to register as sexual offenders. Act 54 of 2018 requires all public and non-public schools and hospitals to display a poster with the toll-free numbers for reporting child abuse and school safety hotlines, as well as the DHS website. It also requires that General Protective Services reports are to be maintained in a statewide database for 10 years, or until the youngest child turns 23 years of age, whichever occurs first. It also allows county agencies to indefinitely maintain information regarding valid GPS reports and unfounded CPS reports to assist in future risk assessments. It allows an employee who supervises a child during internship, externship, work study, co-op, or a similar situation to be considered as a volunteer and eligible to use volunteer clearances, and waive the FBI requirement if they've been a PA resident for 10 years. And finally, it establishes the notification requirements for healthcare providers regarding children under 1 year of age affected by substance exposure, which includes the multidisciplinary teams for identification and assessment of needs of safety plans. Act 88 of 2018 allows a court to appoint a family member temporary guardianship in 90-day increments up to 1 year, where a child's custodial parent enters rehabilitation facility for drug and alcohol treatment. And it mandates the cooperation and information sharing between the Court of Common Pleas, DHS, and county agencies when a Court of Common Pleas is considering temporary guardianship. The Act 47 of 2019 allows correctional facility employees to serve as witnesses when incarcerated parents of an adoptee are completing an adoption consent form. It also amends the CPSL by no longer allowing employees or volunteers to be hired on a provisional basis. Child daycares, group daycare homes, and child care homes may still hire provisionally for a period not to exceed 45 days if they obtain a DHS waiver. Clearance requirements for daycare providers, group daycare homes, and family daycare homes are amended by adding arson and strangulation to the list of prohibited hire offenses, and also requiring national sex offender registry verification and requiring out-of-state clearances for employees or volunteers who have resided outside of Pennsylvania within the past 5 years. The Act 88 of 2019 clarified and increased the penalties for failures to report child abuse. The Act 18 of 2020 temporarily extended recertifications for FBI clearances due to the COVID-19 pandemic through December 31st, 2020. And Act 53 of 2021 created a task force on pornography to conduct a review for inadequacies relating to the offense of child pornography, and further provided for the offense of sexual abuse in children and for sentencing related to such offenses. So now we have 4 different scenarios that describe what could possibly happen, or a situation you might run into in the course of working with children. I'm going to read them. If we were in a group setting, I would have a discussion time for these, but they're just some kind of prompts to get you thinking about whether or not you would report these situations. So scenario 1 says that Eddie has always been a little dad. He seems to take care of other children. You have noticed that he always especially seems concerned about his 3 younger siblings, making sure they get to school on time and have what they need for their classes. Today you caught him sneaking extra snacks to take home, and he said that he needed to take it home to feed his brothers and sisters. So is that something that you would report to Childline, or just keep an eye on and not report it right away? Scenario 2 includes Violet, age 11, and she is having a hard time walking. And when she sits down, she acts like it hurts. You ask her what's wrong, but she just looks down and says nothing. A few days later, she's playing soccer with the other kids, and she rolls up her pant legs when she gets warm. You notice dark purple bruising on her inner thighs, and she seems to remember the bruises are there and rolls the pant legs down below her knees. Is this something that you would report to Childline or not report to Childline right away? Scenario 3, a friend is telling you about a recent incident between their adult brother and his teenage son, where they got into a physical fight. During this fight, the 2 threw punches at each other. The father restrained the son against the wall by the neck, and both had bruises when the fight was over. Your friend mentions that this is not the first time he knows of fights like this occurring. Would you report that to Childline or not report that to Childline? And finally, scenario 4, your 10-year-old niece tells you that other girls in school have been touching each other's private areas, but she has not been touched. She mentions 2 of her best friends, Jen and Hannah, talk about not liking it when it happens to them, but they still get touched. Would you report that to Childline or not report that to Childline? Here are a list of references used to create this PowerPoint if you are interested in learning more about Child Protective Services law, reporting abuse, or the domestic relations and other crimes code involved with child abuse. And so that concludes our presentation for today. I thank you very much for listening, and I hope that this has cleared up any questions about mandated reporting that you have had. If you do have further questions, feel free to reach out to myself. I'm willing to be a resource if you have questions about whether or not to report a situation, or you can always call Childline and ask them if you should be reporting a situation or not, and they will be able to provide guidance as well. Thank you very much.